Your personality is just a wounded inner child. And in this video, I'm going to explain why that is and how these wounds create blockages in your life. Let's dive in. So what is the inner child? If you're already on this path of self-discovery, healing, inner work, you would have definitely come across the word inner child. The term the inner child was first coined by a psychologist called Carl Jung. And basically, the inner child is a part of our psyche. It's the unconscious part of ourselves that still resides within us, that is maybe divine, it's playful, it's all of this part of our psyche that makes up who we are. It's an archetype of our personality. And this inner child shapes how we function as an adult, because this inner child along the way gets programmed, wounded, and then this shapes who we become as an adult. And so the inner child is simply an unconscious part of our psyche that often makes the decisions in our adult lives, especially when we are triggered, if your inner child is holding on to a lot of emotional pain. And if you want to actually discover if you have an inner child wound, just click the link in the pinned comments below to take my free dominant inner child wound quiz. This quiz will help determine if you do have an inner child wound and some steps you can begin to take today in order to start your healing process so you can begin to live a more emotionally free life and free of those self-imposing limitations. Click the link in the pinned comments below now. The inner child is very emotional. So this is why we may get triggered, have tantrums, because it is bringing up that aspect, that inner child version of yourself that is deeply emotional, deeply wounded. And so this is when our inner child comes to the surface. Sometimes our inner child even gets jealous. An example of this would be criticizing a child how many gifts and presents they may receive at a birthday party or Christmas time. This is simply a projection of your insecurities in your own inner child that didn't receive that love and affection through gifts, the love language of gift receiving. And so this is when our inner child will come to the surface. So now I'm just going to dive into how we get wounded, where do these wounds come from, and how they show up in our lives as adults. So when children are born, we are completely innocent. Children have this pure innocence about them. They are divine light. So this means they haven't been conditioned, programmed through society, culture, or even trauma yet. This is why children tend to be so authentic. Have you ever seen a child where they come up to you and say, hey, why have you got that thing on your face? Or they point out all of these like flaws about your body that you actually feel insecure about, or they just speak their truth about something. This is because they are so connected to who they are in their authentic essence, their divine light. They haven't really had all of this programming and conditioning that adults receive, or as you grow up, you receive that as the child begins to age. So we get wounded, or at least conditioned and programmed in our childhood. This is mainly through our caregivers, our parents, or whoever was looking after us through childhood. It may have been a tough, traumatic childhood, or mummy and daddy were dealing with their own shit, their own emotional baggage, so that meant they couldn't show up as the best version of themselves to be able to meet your emotional needs. So when a child's emotional needs aren't met, a child will tend to change who they are in order to receive love. They create a false personality, a persona. So maybe this may be where the masks come into place, a good girl or a good boy mask to in order so then they can receive that love. And this is a people pleaser. This is when they conform, they please the parents or the caregivers in order to receive love and affection. This is where their needs will get met, and so this plays out as a safety coping mechanism that we form in order for survival, because children need love. We all need love in order to survive and have our needs met, especially when we're vulnerable at a young age, to have our needs met for like food, shelter, water. Children are totally dependent on their caregivers to meet their physical, emotional, mental needs, and when those aren't met, then children will, like I've said, children tend to change who they are as a coping mechanism, as a way to get their needs met. And then this tends to form limiting beliefs and gets hardwired into the child's nervous system that is developing at that young age. And then these beliefs get stored in this nervous system, and then they carry that around until they decide that they want to change it, usually when they're in their 30s, 40s, 50s, and start to become aware of these limiting beliefs that have formed. And it's not just through our parents, it's culture, it's religion, and just ultimately society that programs children and creates these limiting beliefs and ways that we perceive that we have to live and be in order to survive, to get our needs met, and to have deep and meaningful relationships. So as I was saying, we carry these into our adult life. We continue to operate and see through the lens of our past pain, our trauma, our personality, our ego personality gets formed based on all of this conditioning. It's the sense of self, who we think we are. And this usually comes from a wounded, limiting place, when in fact we are not our personality, we are not the ego, we are not the wounded, triggered inner child. We all have these aspects of ourselves, but that's not who we are. We are that core, divine, true, authentic essence. And so when this all gets blocked up, we self-impose limitations because of these limiting beliefs that we've hardwired into ourselves because of our parents that have conditioned us, culture, like I was saying. And these show up as blockages in the sense of like, I possibly can't do that, or fears that come to the surface when we are trying to start those new projects, have those goals, and all of a sudden we self-sabotage. Certain behavior patterns start to come to the surface, play out over and over again, and actually block us from living that true, authentic, aligned life that we all really want. Other ways these show up in our life is as negative thought patterns, victimhood. People tend to be very identified with their victimhood and say, I've been through this, I've been through that, because in order to receive the love and the validation that they didn't receive in childhood from their own parents. So people get addicted to that. And one of the most obvious ways that these inner child wounds show up in our lives, particularly in adulthood, is that we try to control outcome, we try to control how people perceive us. And this is the ego's way to keep us in a limited place, in a safe zone, and try to control, because that is knowing what goes ahead. So when we have all of these things blocking us, it limits us in our lives to fulfill our potential, to have those opportunities to awaken who we really are, step into our power and live a life, whether that's more an abundant life, emotionally free life, free of all of those thoughts, those negative thought patterns that keep us up at night. So what this means, we have to start the process of letting go. Letting go or unlearning all of these behavior patterns, these wounds that have being hardwired into our nervous system, and really allowing ourselves to feel those emotions that have caused the wounding, that we have suppressed, that's caused us to control, to put limitations on ourselves. And so it's a never-ending process of letting go. And just as a reminder, if you want to find out what your dominant inner child wound is, just click the link in the pinned comments below to take my free inner child wound quiz. So you'll be sent an email with the first steps on how you can begin your healing journey today. Just click the link in the pinned comments now. And if you want to go deeper on inner child wounds, check out this video next, where I dive into the topic of daddy wounds. So that being said, I'll see you in this video. Much love.